What's good, everybody? Surreal AG here with the Lockdown Defense Sports Network, and the Hit Squad is continuing on our preseason preview segment, looking at that wiki wild NFC West this go around, and the Arizona Cardinals, and what's on the horizon for 2025. Quick recap for the Cardinals in 2024, which was head coach Jonathan Gannon's second year. They did see a pretty good improvement from the prior year. They went 8-9, third in the NFC West. Like I said, a big improvement from the 4-13 they went in 23, and they actually were 6-4 heading into their Week 11 bye, and it all went downhill from there, which kind of seems to be a continuing trend with some people that have been at the helm, for this franchise for a few years now. But the one bright note from 2024 for Arizona, they did sweep their division rivals in the 49ers. But I think looking at this offseason in a nutshell, so to speak, entering the offseason, the Cardinals certainly had burning questions, with the development of their young talent, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. And can this coaching staff, get the full potential out of Baby Yoda, aka Kyler Murray, and Marvin Harrison Jr. They also needed to, seriously address their pass rush, improve their run defense, and solidify their offensive line. I think they made a lot of moves to answer some of those questions, and everything kind of lays at the feet of Kyler Murray, entering year 7 here in his era without a single playoff win. So, on paper, I think the Cardinals made a lot of moves to become one of the more improved teams heading into this year, through the free agent signings and the draft. They had some serious money to spend and let it rain in that free agency pool. And, I think ultimately elected to shore up the defensive side of the ball and, make this a make or break year for Kyler Murray and what he can do on the offensive side of things. So, looking at what they did in their notable re-signings / free agent signings, looking at who they retained first and foremost, they re-signed Baron Browning, who they traded for 2 years, $15 million, re-signed their guard, Evan Brown, re-signed Zay Jones, re-signed D lineman LJ Collier. They also re-signed their long snapper, which is pretty pivotal in the special teams. They also signed tight end Trey McBride to a pretty massive 4-year extension, and they did not really lose any significant players to other teams in free agency. And then looking at the money that they did spend in that free agency pool, they signed edge rusher Josh Sweat to 4 years, $76.4 million. They signed linebacker Akeem Davis Gaither. They signed interior D lineman Dalvin Tomlinson, signed QB Jacoby Brissett, signed tackle Jacob Curhan, and signed wide receiver Simi Fihoko, as well as linebacker Michael Walker down there a little bit lower. But looking at kind of the big ticket free agent items are the most impactful signings, in my opinion. I think first and foremost, you got to look at the guy at the top, per usual, and Josh Sweat. That move immediately bolsters their edge rush, and I think it was one of the more quality ways to spend money for a team this offseason, because you're looking at getting a guy who's been productive with where he was at in Philly. You're reuniting him with his former DC and Gannon. And honestly, Sweat had his best season with Gannon in 2022. Moving on to another big signing, in my opinion, is really a twofold. And he's not listed on here, but they signed, interior D lineman Dalvin Tomlinson, as well as Calais Campbell. And again, both of those moves significantly improve their defensive front. Looking at Tomlinson, he is known as a fairly durable player in the NFL and is pretty decent at both pass rushing and run stopping. And then you look at Campbell, he is 38, somehow still playing at just a behemoth of a man. But, looking at, he's returning to where he started his career. I think his experience and leadership overall brings tremendous value to the locker room. And, I think that he will certainly help develop some of the younger players that they brought in through the draft. So, love that signing as well, and love to see him return home and probably what's going to be a farewell tour for him in 2025. And then the last impactful signing, in my opinion, is quarterback Jacoby Brissett. And, I think you look at it from a multitude of ways. First, Kyler Murray certainly comes with his injury concerns. I don't think, I think the past 2 years he's missed time due to injuries. And you look at the other side of the coin with Brissett, he brings in, valuable veteran experience, a relatively low career interception rate, and just some overall stability at that backup QB spot should something unfortunately happen to QB1. So those are my 3, 4 big impactful free agent signings. Moving on to the draft, I thought the Arizona Cardinals had a tremendous draft. I give them an overall A- grade in the moves that they made. And like I said, you can continue the trend. They continued the trend, and you can see what the theme was for the offseason in bolstering the defensive side of the ball, especially the defensive front. And you look at their first 5 picks were defensive players. 6 of their 7 total picks were on the defensive side of the ball, with their lonely offensive pick being an offensive lineman and Hayden Connor from Texas in the 6th round. So, looking at the picks in total, you got first round pick was Walter Nolan, the D tackle out of Ole Miss. Second round was Will Johnson, the cornerback out of Michigan. Third round took Jordan Birch, the edge rusher out of Oregon. And fourth round, they took linebacker Cody Simon out of Ohio State. Brought his buddy in the 5th round and corner Denzel Burke. I already mentioned Mr. Connor. And in the 7th round, they took safety Ketan Crawford out of Nebraska. Looking at what I think will be probably the most impactful draft selections that they made, and this was not by design, ladies and gentlemen, but I think it is the 2 people at the top. First and foremost, Walter Nolan is a huge upside pick, in my opinion. I think already arguably the best D tackle from that class, and could certainly solidify that through his play. Again, they addressed a significant area of need early, and hope that he can develop pretty quickly, learning from Calais Campbell, Dalvin Tomlinson, and the like in that room. And you look at Nolan, he's a pretty sneaky, athletic interior D lineman and can get after the quarterback. He had 6.5 sacks and 14 TFLs last year at Ole Miss. And then moving on to the next impactful draft selection, I'm looking at cornerback Will Johnson out of Michigan. First and foremost, I think it's impactful because I would argue that the Arizona Cardinals got 2 first-round picks through their first 2 selections, because Will Johnson, leading up to the draft, was, in everyone's opinion, a solidified top 20 pick. Had some injury concerns through the combine and the pre-draft process, and that saw him fall all the way down to 47. I would say that's all the inner workings of being a huge steal in the draft. And this is a pick that I've praised in other videos we've done on the network. So love the pick. Doesn't really bolster the front of the defense, obviously, but certainly impacts the secondary. And I think you got a guy that is instantly coming in and competing for a starting role. So to get that out of your first 2 picks, huge upside for a team that's really looking to take that next step forward in 2025. Looking at the trades, coaching changes, really Arizona was relatively quiet on this front. They have made no significant moves in terms of the trade market. I have not even seen any ramblings of any potential lucrative trade rumors out there. So I think that their roster is pretty set, barring any significant injuries. And then with the coaching staff, added some guys to their assistant staff, but again, nothing major. So looking at the offense or off season as a whole, I thought again they made tremendous moves and answered a lot of questions, and have kind of laid everything at the feet of Baby Yoda here, to see how they will do in 2025 and moving forward with their franchise. But looking at the schedule overall, the NFL schedule makers weren't necessarily super nice to the Cardinals, but they also weren't totally whack in setting their opponents. They do have the 11th easiest strength of schedule based on their opponent's win percentage from 2024. They also got the lucky draw of playing both the AFC and NFC South this year in their matchups. And Vegas has their win total at 8.5. The games I'm circling here, I'm looking at week 3 against the 49ers. That's, an early divisional test for them. Week 7, they play the Packers, who pretty much embarrassed them last year, during their good stretch of games. And you look at week 9 out of their bye, you got the Kyler Murray homecoming to Texas against them boys. Just the stretches here, I think weeks 1 through 4 and 9 through 11 are the two that will really define the Cardinals season. So, looking at offseason grade and overall prediction here, like I said right here, I rated their offseason as a whole as a B. I think they killed the draft. I like the free agency moves they made. Really bolstered everything on the defensive side of the ball, in my opinion, but still left some serious question marks on the offensive side. Like I said, seem to be laying everything at the feet of Kyler Murray for this year, but they still have serious questions about the strength of their interior offensive line, questions about their playmakers really outside of Trey McBride, and to see what they can get out of Marvin Harrison, and just an overall question as to how consistent can this offense be, because the track record, is a little wavy. Let's just put it that way. But then, looking at their schedule and my ultimate prediction, I said it right there. I got them, I think, improving. I think at 10-7 and right in the fold to either win the NFC West or make a playoff spot. And, my hot take, and maybe it's not that hot just because of how the Cardinals have been in the past years, but I think they start the season at a relatively really nice record. I like 4-2 or 5-1, and really, pretty much are in the driver's seat to control their playoff destiny. And, like I said, this will be the make or break year, because in past years with Baby Yoda, once Call of Duty drops, so do the wins, and they're boom right out of playoff contention. So we will see if this is a different year for them in that regard. But quickly going through my predicted win losses, I got them beating the Saints and the Panthers in some pretty cakey NFC South matchups to start the year. I think they lose to the 49ers at Levi's Stadium. I see them beating the Seahawks week 4 Thursday Night Football with Darnold and co trying to figure things out. I got them beating the Titans and the Colts. I think they lose to the Packers week 7. I think they beat the Cowboys week 9 in Murray's homecoming, the former Allen, Texas boy coming back home. I think they lose to the Seahawks away in week 10. I think they beat the Niners at home week 11, beat the Jags week 12, lose to the Bucks week 13, beat the Rams at home week 14, beat the Texans week 15, lose to the Falcons, lose to the Bengals, and lose to the Rams away to close out the year. So, like I said, everything is at the feet of Kyler Murray. It is a make it or break it year for him. And if we see a lot of what we have seen in the past, I think we see Arizona moving on in 2026. Like I said, I think they start hot and are in the driver's seat, and it'll be a wild ride for Cardinals fans and just football fans to see if Baby Yoda can figure things out in year 7 and maybe get a playoff win, or at least set himself up to get one. But you got that, and what they can get out of Marvin Harrison Jr. Will he have a sophomore surge? Those are the two burning questions for this team in 2025. But I think they shored up their defense. They got their defensive guru, scheming things up, and I think that side of the ball will keep games close. And again, it's going to fall to the feet of Kyler Baby Yoda Murray. But that is it for our Arizona Cardinals preview, ladies and gentlemen. As always, please hit like and subscribe on the video. Please comment your thoughts, concerns, questions below. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to get at me or any of the fellow Hit Squad members, there's our social info right there. If you want to find more Lockdown Defense Sports content, boom, it is anywhere and everywhere your smartphone will take you. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, I'm the real AG. That is my NFC West preview of the Arizona Cardinals, and I'll be seeing you when I see you. And make sure that y'all out there stepping it up and locking it down, baby.
you.